Okay, so this is just a little bit of an extension of what we learned earlier today about the quadratic formula and just how it's amazing and it can solve any type of equation we want, regardless of if we can factor or not. But now we're going to talk a little bit more about how the quadratic formula can help us predict, meaning kind of know ahead of time what types of solutions we're going to have to our quadratic equation. So let's just kind of remind ourselves like just what these different graphs mean. If I'm looking at this one, the question is asking how many solutions does it have? We're not asking what are the solutions, but how many. So they're wanting us to predict. So when I look at this first one, I notice I have two x-intercepts or two zeros. That means I have two real solutions. I can see them with my own eyes. When I look at the second one, I only notice that there's one zero, which means I have one real solution, which means that you would have something like x minus 3 times x minus 3. You'd have it like twice, meaning like it's just going to mean 1. You just have x equals 3, and that's what that would look like. And then the very last one, notice how there's no x-intercepts here. So that means that there's no real solutions because we can't see them. But we remember with the quadratic, there's always two solutions, and maybe sometimes it's the same thing, but when there's two, that means we're going to have two imaginary solutions, meaning we can't see them. But somewhere they're called imaginary. It's kind of a weird idea, but if you can't see the x-intercepts, just know they're imaginary. So what we're going to do is be able to predict how to figure out like what types of solutions we have. We're going to be able to answer these questions without having the graph. So this is a very important skill that you're going to need to know. They're going to test it to you on your test. They're going to ask you on common assessments, and it's something called the discriminant. So the discriminant is just the little part inside the square root. So in that quadratic formula that we talked about today, the expression the b squared minus 4ac, they call that the discriminant. So say it to yourself, discriminant. And that is still associated with the a and the b and the c in that standard form. But what it is it's that little section inside the square root. So for instance, if you kind of remember like the square root of 4, square root of 0, square root of maybe a negative, what that number is on the inside is going to tell us the number and the type of solutions that we're going to get when we do the whole quadratic formula. So what's nice is you have to do that inside part first anyways, since it kind of gets the math craziness out of the way. So when you're doing this math, you're going to be able to understand what your graph is going to look like and what types of solutions you're going to have. So we're going to use, from the little example I did at the very beginning, we're going to use these examples and see if we can notice the pattern that we're going to be using. So for instance, here's that first graph, and I'm just going to have my A is 1, my B is -6, and my C is 8, because it's already set equal to 0. And we're going to analyze the discriminant, meaning that little part inside the square root, b squared minus 4ac. That's going to tell us the key. Let's see what we get. So when I do b squared, I get -6 squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is 8. So that gives me 36 minus 32, which is equal to 4. So I got positive 4 here. On the second one, I have b squared minus 4ac. Well, b in this case is -6 again, so -6 squared minus 4 times a, which is 1 again, and c this time is 9. So when I do the math here, I get 36 minus 4 times 9 is also 36. So here I get equals to 0. And on the last one, when I do b squared minus 4ac, well, my b is -6 again, -6 squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is 10. Here I get 36 minus 40, which gives me a -4. So for these, I have 4, 0, and -4. Now this isn't the answer. This is the discriminant. We're just doing that little piece, like I said, inside the square root. That's what we're just trying to do first. And it's called a discriminant, and this is going to help us determine. So what I notice here is that I have a positive 4 on the first one, I have 0, and this is the one solution on the second one. And on the last one, I have a negative. And if you remember, when we take the square root of a negative, right, this is the inside of the square root. When I take the square root of a negative, that's not really possible. That's when we get that positive or negative 2i, meaning that I is imaginary. And what I notice here is that I have my 2 imaginary solutions because there's no place where this graph is touching the x-axis. So that's the key. What we just learned is how to make a prediction of what types of solutions we're going to have. So when that b squared minus 4ac, we're talking about the inside of the square root, when it is positive, meaning greater than 0, then that's going to tell us we're going to have 2 real solutions, meaning somewhere on our graph it's going to touch twice. When I look at the second one, b squared minus 4ac, if that's equal to 0, think the square root of 0 is just 0. It's not positive or negative 0 because it's not positive or negative. So we just have one real solution, one spot. Think 0, 1, right? They both kind of have the O. Try to remember it that way. And then last, we remember if it's negative, meaning less than 0, we remind ourselves that that's imaginary because we can't take the square root of a negative technically. So we are going to call those the imaginary solutions, meaning it's not going to touch the x-axis at all. There's no x-intercepts. So that's the key. That's what we're going to be able to figure out ahead of time, and we're going to know what types of solutions. So that's what we're just going to practice a little bit today. So the big key here is when the discriminant is positive, then that means the quadratic equation has 2 real solutions. We have 2 of them, meaning it's going to touch twice. When the discriminant is 0, meaning that b squared minus 4ac equals 0, we're just going to have one real solution because we won't have to do positive or negative 0. It's just 0, right? It's not going to change that answer. And the last one is when our discriminant is negative, meaning that b squared minus 4ac is negative, the quadratic equation is going to have 2 imaginary solutions, meaning we're going to have I. So remember, that means we're going to have I somewhere in our solutions. So here are the steps to figure out the type and how many solutions they have. Because sometimes they might ask you, hey, not what are the solutions, they might say, hey, how many and what type of solution does this equation have? And these are the steps to do that. Same similar steps that we did this morning or during class today was afternoon. If needed, remember the first step is we always want to get it equal to 0 first. Then, just like we did this morning as well, or during class, we have A and B and C. We're going to figure out what those are. And this should say minus 4AC. I'm sorry, a little typo. I'll fix that. But we're just going to find the discriminant. Again, that's the inside of the quadratic formula. And you don't have to memorize this. This is on your equation sheet. You just need to remember that the discriminant is that little part inside the square root. Based on what that is, we're going to be able to find the solution. So I'm just going to do 2 more examples, and then you're going to have the rest of this time to practice. So looking at the first one, it's already set equal to 0, so we're good. A is 4, B is 8, and C is 4. So now I'm just going to plug it into the b squared minus 4ac. That's my discriminant. So b is 8, so 8 squared minus 4 times a, which is 4, times c, which is 4. That's the b squared minus 4ac. And when I do the math here, 8 squared is 64. And I'm subtracting 4 times 4 times 4. I already used my calculator on my phone. I got 64. And that's going to give me 0. So once I find the discriminant, step 3, then I need to determine the type of solution. Well, when I remember my steps, when it's equal to 0, I'm going to have one real solution. So that's all I'm going to write. One real solution. And that would be my answer because they weren't asking for what is the solution. They just want to know what type and how many. Let's do one more example together and then you're going to have a chance to practice. So A is 0.5 this time, B is 1, and C is -1. So when I do my discriminant, b squared minus 4ac, b is 1, a is 0.5, and c is -1. Okay, so I notice this is going to make this negative. So 1, -4, right? Or I'm going to keep this negative, and 4 times 0.5 times -1, that's going to give me -2. Well, those two negatives make a positive, so I get 1 plus 2, which is 3. And notice that it is positive. This is positive, which when I go back and remember, when my discriminant is positive or greater than 0, I'm going to have 2 real solutions. So because it is positive, I have 2 real solutions. You can't just say 2 solutions. You got to mention if it's real or imaginary. Okay, so here are your instructions for the rest of this time. This was only a quick 10 minutes. But now you can go and complete the rest of this table. It's in your notes. And then I have some more practice for you at the bottom where I want you to actually solve. Solving meaning find what x is actually equal to. And it's just a little bit of a puzzle. You're going to be able to solve these 10 questions, and there's different answers with the letters. And you can answer the riddle that says, what did the couch say halfway through the marathon? So your homework or your asynchronous time is just to finish the rest of your notes. And remember, if you get stuck, here's how you can go find the solutions. If you are in the OneNote app, so if you see the OneNote app, you're going to be able to go to your content library. And look, I'm already filling out the teacher key for you. So don't go to your name, go to the content library, and then go to teacher keys. And it's always, if these are all open, you can close them. But it's the very, very bottom one. And you're going to find the solutions to this practice if you get stuck. So, get to work and good luck.